Well, AquaSpy has, for many years, been putting in-field sensors in to collect data on just about every crop imaginable. We have tens and tens and tens of thousands of fields and history from this in-field sensor data. And from those, we produce intelligent algorithms that help the farmer explore a third dimension. So farming typically looks at the X and the Y coordinates, sort of a horizontal or flat type of thing. Our data allows them to have knowledge of and try to control the outcome by virtue of the z-axis. So in other words, by depth. Every 4 inches, and this is where the root meets the soil and the nutrients within, depending on where your roots are at depth-wise and where they're active and trying to eat from, your job as the grower to get the best yield you can, the healthiest crop, and with the least amount of waste of nitrogen and water and any other nutrients. It's matching supply and demand by depth. So at the z-axis, every 4, 8, 12, 16, every 4 inches, all the way down to 48 inches, we let you know if, for example, your fertilizer or your moisture that carries it is at a certain depth and your roots are above that depth, or your roots are already below that depth. So you can decide whether you need to put another application on or not.
And this year, we're real excited because we actually expanded even further into the specialty crop world through releasing wireless technology. So what was really an improvement in ease of installation and utilization for the growers, and also their retail partners, their agronomy partners, who can advise on this excellent data. But the wireless technology makes it so that there's less equipment in the field. It takes just minutes to install, and it works with virtually any cellular connected network. So that's pretty cool. We're excited to be working with different growers and expanding even further into those tens of thousands of fields that Bruce was mentioning.
And our markets are sort of bifurcated between irrigated fields and dry land. And although we have a value proposition for both, because you want to know where your roots are at and where your nutrients are at, and you want to try to not let those leach through to the ground table, this knowledge of the z-axis allows you to make the correct decisions on whether you're going to water or whether you're going to put another fertilizer application on or whatever. But the key to this adoption, of course, as in any market, is it's got to work. And I don't mean just technically, of course it does that, but it's got to deliver the value proposition, which means you're going to get the maximum yield at the minimum of input costs if you use the algorithms and take the advice that the software is giving you to do. So you can see in real time at all times, but that's not enough for mass adoption. It's got to be really inexpensive, and it's got to deliver.
Yeah, being a grower is really a tough job. Now, we can't do anything about the hail and the weather, but we can really help with a lot of the other challenges. What we're seeing today is like pretty much everybody mentions labor shortages. They talk about budget constraints. Prices are going up, transportation, nutrients, fuel, all these things are, going up in price. There's drought, and places that we haven't had drought. I'm in California, and we have droughts, but now we're seeing a terrible drought in Canada and in Nebraska and Kansas, and areas that typically had not had those sorts of challenges. And on top of that, then that brings a declining water supply. And changing climates make the weather more challenging, more extreme. And so, growers are in a reactionary sort of a place around that. So they're using more technology to help them. One of the things that we talked about is that, our equipment is wireless. So the grower doesn't have to go out. They don't have to scout as much. They don't have to go out in the field. And so it saves a lot of trips, not having to go out and see what the state is, if it's the crop wilting or does it look stressed. They can get that data remotely 24/7, hour by hour. So they immediately know what the crop is telling them, and if the crop is stressed, even before it's probably even visually noticeable. They, along with the drought and the less water that's in the soil, is increased salinity, and so some growers are being a lot more careful about what crops they're putting in, or using the water that they have available maybe to push the salts deeper. So those sorts of management techniques are really important to be able to react to these new challenges that face them.
Yeah, one of the salient points that Kathleen alluded to, but I'll home in on it a little bit more deeply, is the fact that our system, unlike others, the others are prescriptive. We're not. So because it's such a fluid and dynamic environment, with the relationship to the environment itself changing and the crops changing and the different crop types that are being planted, the seed variants and so forth that are coming on, we think it's important that the farmer take his signal from the crop itself, from the roots. So there's in a prior business, Kathleen and I and others of this company were in together. We watched human behavior and we did predictive analysis on human behavior. Now we've taken that same concept and put it together with root behavior. And believe it or not, there is predictable root behavior, and it'll tell you if it's stressing or it's hungry, it's dying, it's mismanaged, it's flooded, it's overwhelmed with water, whatever the condition is. You take that signal through our filtered algorithms, it will interpret for you. I hate to say we're the crop whisperer, but that's probably the closest thing people can identify with. We take those behavioral signals and we turn them into actionable items that the grower can do to alleviate any of the stresses that are going on with his crop.
Yeah, and there's a lot of intelligence built into that. We have just completed over several thousand. I think we've had like 3,000 or so studies returned where we've been able to correlate delivered yield back to what the algorithm said. And there's a lot of really interesting learnings about what actions beget what behaviors throughout the season for the crop. And so the growers can use this that's why we made this a multi-year contract. There's a lot of learning, and especially if growers are doing something like trying to transition to regenerative farming, either parsing out a section and wanting to do comparative analysis, or wanting that year over year history of seeing the improvement. So there's a lot of ability for them to use this for process improvement, either comparatively or over time as they're transitioning.
Yeah, so first of all, I want to humbly submit that I don't pretend to be prescient and have knowledge that other human beings don't have. But from my limited perspective, it's pretty obvious to me that the dynamics of climate change and the higher temperatures forcing more and more things further north from what used to be south. So the north is becoming the old south is now in the new north. And so you don't have years and years of precedents to rely upon. Well, my grandfather did it this way. Nothing is the same. Of course, we all know the universe is ever changing. Nothing ever stops, but we're now moving at an accelerated pace. So the levers you can push when you're growing, the main ones are: what are you growing? When? Does it have enough moisture to support it? What and which nutrients? Does it need nitrogen or phosphorus or potassium or whatever that particular crop needs at that particular time, at that particular depth? You're going to need all the help you can get, because you can no longer just wet your finger and put it in the air to see which way the wind is blowing. The wind is blowing in all different directions. A lot of it is circular, and it's a whole lot stronger than it ever used to be, and that's only going to intensify. So that's what I think the challenges are, and the ability to manage those is there, but it requires the guts to look into the abyss and fight it with technology that you never had available before. Not just ours. I'm not trying to make this about just our technology. There are a lot of technologies that can be adopted to help people, but I can't pretend to speak for the ones that we're not doing, because I'm not intimately familiar with those.
I'm going to break that down into two pieces. So first, I'm going to say data. Data is what's going to make all the difference. And data about one's own field, data that the retailers are using to help better advise their customers, their partner growers, but also data sharing. And that's been a challenge in the past, is this idea of data sharing. And so it's one of the important advancements that we'll need to see: data normalization, standardization, and the ability to see what your neighbors are doing and having better informed decisions faster, because things are changing faster, as Bruce mentioned. And so really that's in my opinion, is it all comes back to the data. And we can talk about autonomy, we can talk about some of this really fancy stuff, but in the end, also all of that is about the data, and it's above ground and below ground. And I'm real excited. We partner with a lot of folks who are doing ground technology, whether it's satellite imaging or analysis of the pests or the diseases or things like that. So there's a whole 360 view of the farm that the grower needs. And actually, if you start to bring in what I call land and cattle, or in the regenerative world, if you're bringing your goats or your pigs or your cattle onto the land, then you'll need technology and data about managing that, and then all of that holistically in the regenerative world. Collaboration. So with AquaSpy, I'm real excited over the last couple of years. It's the formation of groups like the Global AgTech Alliance to partner with other interested folks who are passionate about the advancement of ag tech, the adoption. How do we use it? How do we use it better? How do we share that data that I alluded to earlier? And the just formed the Women in Ag Tech group, which our first meeting is coming up in Iowa in July. And bringing like-minded folks together that are I'm going to borrow a phrase from Silicon Valley. I told you I lived in California. So, move fast and break things. That's not how ag is. Ag is the opposite of move fast and break things. And so we want to help, growers and the retailers feel more comfortable about this data sharing, advancements, how to use this, and move forward from we've always done this way for the last 2, 3, 4, 5 generations, because that's the kind of thing that's going to help us all collectively. We don't have that many, I hate to even, bring back the thing everybody says, we only have so many crops and harvests left. And so we don't have an unlimited amount of time to, as Bruce said, migrate to the better growing regions, experiment with the new technology. So whatever we can do, we're actively hands-on about those committees, working with our partner retailers. We do a lot of collaboration with them, field days and other things that help them help their growers adopt tech too. One of the big programs that's had a lot of success, and we're seeing offshoots of it, is the UNL TAPS program. And what's been successful about that is they have field competitions. They allow the growers to experiment freely. And so there's proven data that that the growers can maximize yield while minimizing inputs and increasing profitability. So the winner wins because they've achieved very strong farm profitability. And this is what's going to get everybody's attention. And then they share that data with each other. Their neighbors see it, and they do this. And so this has now spawned CSU TAPS, OSU TAPS. There's a number of master irrigator programs in Colorado. I think there's one in the Texas Panhandle. There's one, I think, forming in Mississippi off the top of my head. I'm really excited about these programs. And so we're working collaboratively with universities and these master irrigator programs to help them create more awareness in all the reaches that they can get to.
Well, for one thing, we turn loose our resident extrovert, Kathleen, on every and anybody who wants to listen and collaborate and share openly. We think that's one way for an industry to start getting some momentum toward mass adoption is by not keeping proprietary standards, having open APIs. People can share information to create standards and the most efficacious solutions for all the growers. And while she's out worrying about people, the rest of us, or me certainly, worry about, does this stuff work? Are we applying the science right? Is it reliable? Is it affordable? What else can we do to make that jump across to my job? Really, in my view, is to give you an offer, not to be an old corny movie guy, but give you that offer you can't refuse. My job is to remove every obstacle that I can possibly think of so that you make this decision to adopt, you never regret it. And it's, the old California phrase, and I'm in Indiana right now, but I used to live in California. It's a no-brainer to make that decision. One thing that's important about ag and ag tech, as everybody well knows, and it's unlike other industries that we've been in, is you've got to have a return on investment, that ROI. You've got to have it, but you have to have it in the same season. It's got to be ROI right now. They can't wait 3 or 4 seasons to see it manifest. And we provide a solution that absolutely correlates to that higher yield with the lower input cost. It's not uncommon to have a 10 or a 12 times return on investment in that same season. The lower we can get the price, the more adoption that we all get, and then the more efficient the solution comes to everybody. And pretty soon, it's like cell phones. Cell phones originally, you may or may not know, were originally these, I know you remember them being these big, clunky, almost telephone booth sized things that you had to lug around to show you were wealthy enough to have a private phone system, right? But they actually invented those for plumbers and electricians and so forth, so that when they were on a job, they could take the call and not miss new business. That's how they came to be. And originally it was thought it wasn't going to be a mass adoption. It was that specialty niche. But people did what I'm talking about doing, not that I had anything to do with that, but just making it reliable and more affordable and more ubiquitous. And pretty soon everybody's got to have it. You can't not operate without it, or you're operating at a disadvantage. That's how cell phones got to be, whatever it was. Kathleen probably knows this better than me. 7 cell phones to every 1 human on the planet or something like that. We'll get there with ag too. It just has a higher and more immediate payback. Well, I think we have the challenges as a society of being able to rely on one another and trust one another and not shoot one another. We've got to have truth out there. We've got to get to the gist of what the truth is, what people need. And so if you have a need that's not being met, or if we're not meeting that need, we're not arrogant. We're happy to understand that and solve it scientifically. We just have to all start to come together and trust one another, that we really do have one another's best interests at heart. And it's not about one company or one individual getting to be the keeper of all data, or of all the billions that are reaped from that. Ag doesn't work that way. It's by nature a sharing kind of a community. You don't grow all that food to feed your own family. You're feeding the world. We've all got to realize that we're all in that together and trust each other and not let each other down. So that would be sort of my pantheon of things that need to work well for all of us to survive on this planet without pillaging its scarce resources.
I don't know if I've got, yeah, that was a really good summary. It is collaborative. I'm happy to see the realization through some of the big brands working with smallholders, with some of the folks, say like Leading Harvest, who are establishing principles and improving ag, and I think Bruce said it or alluded to it earlier, where you don't get to be in a place where you tell them what to do. We have to provide the guidelines and the tools and the resources and let the answers be figured out. And it does vary by crop, and it does vary by region and latitude and soil type. And so, that reality is there, but we can all be a lot more collaborative and sharing, so we help the others who are kind of treading over the same ground.